Reports of strange activity in the abandoned logging area began to pile up long before anyone took them seriously. At first, they were simple complaints from hunters who claimed to have heard distant screams or knocks on the trees. Then, more specific reports started coming in. Footprints, structures made of branches, and brief sightings. Over time, the patterns began to repeat too often to be ignored. The area in question is a maze of old roads, rusted warehouses, and collapsed camps left behind when the logging industry pulled out more than 30 years ago. Nature reclaimed almost everything, but human traces can still be found among the pines. Overturned trailers, piles of rotten wood, and the remains of heavy machinery. It is an ideal place to hide, both for animals and for something larger. One of the first detailed records occurred in the late 90s. A forest ranger patrolling the area found a series of enormous footprints along a dry stream bed. They measured almost 40 centimeters long and more than 15 wide, with unusual depth, as if something extremely heavy had walked there. There were no claw marks or hoof shapes. They were clearly footprints resembling a human foot, but of an impossible size. After that discovery, other signs began to be documented. Young trees twisted and bent at more than 2 meters high, logs stacked into strange figures, and large handprints on the metal walls of the old sheds. Some witnesses claimed to have seen the creature up close and agreed on very similar descriptions. According to those accounts, the being that inhabits the area stands between 2 and 2.5 meters tall, with extremely broad shoulders and disproportionately long arms. Its body is covered with dark hair, ranging from brown to black depending on the light. It walks upright with long, firm steps and moves with surprising speed for its size. Several witnesses also mentioned a strong, penetrating smell that accompanies its presence, a mixture of dampness, wet earth, and wild animal. That detail appears in almost every report, even from people who had never heard previous stories about the place. One of the most documented encounters happened just a few years ago, when a group of urban explorers entered the area to photograph the abandoned buildings. They recorded deep sounds coming from the forest, rhythmic knocks against the trees, and for a few seconds, a tall figure walking through the vegetation. The video is blurry, but it clearly shows a bipedal silhouette that does not match any known animal in the region. What is most disturbing is that the activity always seems to be concentrated in the same spots, near the old fuel storage buildings and in the clearings where workers once slept, as if the creature had learned to associate those places with human presence and now watches over them permanently. No one can say for certain what moves through those forgotten woods, but the physical evidence, the consistent testimonies, and the continuity of the reports over the years suggest that something real lives there, something large, intelligent, and perfectly adapted to a territory that humans abandoned long ago. As long as the old logging zone remains standing, silent, and overgrown, the reports will continue to arrive. And with each new sighting, the legend becomes a little less like a legend and a little harder to deny.
That place was abandoned. Even so, some of us still visited out of curiosity or necessity. I usually go to look for scrap metal and forgotten tools among the ruins of the camps. The first time I noticed something strange was one autumn afternoon. I had found an old metal shed, half collapsed, and I was checking what was left inside. Suddenly, I heard a sharp bang against the outside wall, as if someone had thrown a large stone. I went out thinking it might be a hunter, but there was no one there, only the silent forest. When I walked around the building, I found fresh marks in the mud, huge footprints that did not look like those of any animal I knew. I went back several times after that. The place gave me a mixture of fear and attraction. On more than one occasion, I heard noises among the trees, heavy steps moving parallel to the path. I never saw anything, but I felt that something was watching me. One night, I decided to stay longer than usual to try to understand what was happening. I brought a powerful flashlight and an old camera. Near sunset, I began to hear rhythmic knocks in the distance, as if someone were hitting tree trunks with a stick. It was not the sound of the wind or branches hitting each other. It was something intentional. I hid behind a rusty trailer and pointed the flashlight into the darkness. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then I saw a large shadow moving among the pines, too tall and too wide to be a person. I felt my blood run cold. I turned off the flashlight by instinct and stayed still. Whatever it was walked around the clearing without making much noise, as if it knew the terrain better than anyone. The smell was what impressed me the most, a strong odor of dampness and wild animal. I had never smelled anything like it. When I returned to my truck, I found another surprise. On the hood, someone had left a pile of branches and stones stacked up, like a message. There was no one nearby, and I had been alone the whole time. I understood that I was not welcome. Since then, I have talked to other people in town, and many have similar stories. They say that area was always strange, even when it was full of workers. Some old-timers remember that the loggers avoided certain sections because tools would disappear or tents would be found destroyed without explanation. I do not know exactly what is out there, but I am sure it's not a simple animal. Something is still living in that abandoned forest, something that prefers humans to stay away. And after what I saw, I think it has every right to demand it. For years, no one wanted to go near the old logging area north of the river. The roads were cut off, the bridges rotted away, and the buildings collapsed. For most people, it is only an uncomfortable memory of a time when the forest was exploited too much. For others, it is a place better left alone. One particularly harsh winter, I decided to camp there to hunt deer. I thought that being so far from everything, there would be less competition and more peace. I set up my tent near an old fuel depot, a spot that offered some protection from the wind. Everything seemed normal during the day, except for one detail. There were almost no animals. No squirrels, no birds, not even insects. It was an unnatural silence. The second night, a loud noise behind the tent woke me up. It sounded like wood breaking. I assumed an old tree had fallen, but the sound repeated several times, each time closer. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside. The freshly fallen snow clearly showed new tracks around the campsite. They were not from a bear or a moose. They looked like human footprints, but gigantic. I tried to convince myself that someone was playing a joke on me, although it made no sense. No one else knew I was there. I spent the rest of the night without sleeping, listening to footsteps circling my tent again and again. At dawn, I found my cooler open and empty. The little food I had brought was gone. I decided to stay one more day to investigate. I placed empty cans hanging from a string around the camp so they would make noise if anyone approached. I also left an old camera pointed toward the clearing. When night fell, I locked myself in the tent with a feeling of unease I could not explain. Near midnight, the cans began to rattle loudly. Someone was walking among them without worrying about the noise. I turned on the flashlight and shouted, trying to scare away whoever it was. The only response I received was a deep growl that made my chest vibrate. I had never heard a voice like that. The next morning, I checked the camera. The image was blurry, but a tall figure covered in dark hair could be seen standing exactly where I had been sitting hours earlier. It did not look like a costume or a trick. It was something real. I left that same day and never went back. I told some forest rangers what had happened, and they only looked at me with serious faces. They said I was not the first to return with strange stories from that area. According to them, since the sawmills closed, something had claimed the place as its own. I do not know what visited me on those nights, but I am sure that abandoned territory no longer belongs to men, and maybe it never should have.
I usually take my Jeep out on old forest trails to test the suspension and look for quiet places to camp for free. Last Saturday, I decided to drive into that old logging area they closed years ago. The gate was open, which seemed strange to me, but I went in anyway. The road was in terrible shape, full of brambles and young trees growing right in the middle of the track. You could tell no one had worked up there in a long time. I found a clearing where they used to stack the logs and decided to stop there for the night. Everything was very quiet. Too quiet. Normally at this time of year you can hear crickets or birds, but there was nothing. I started heating up a can of beans on my little stove, and suddenly I caught a disgusting smell. It was like hot garbage mixed with rotten meat. I figured maybe there was a dead animal nearby and didn't think much of it, although it did kill my appetite a bit. Then I heard a bang. It came from the thickest part of the woods, uphill. I thought, okay, a branch must have fallen. 2 minutes later, the same noise, but this time it came from the other side, to my right. I stood up and looked toward the trees. It was almost dark by then. "Is anyone there?" I shouted. I thought maybe it was some local kids coming up to drink and mess around. Nobody answered, but right after I yelled, a stone about the size of an apple flew out from the bushes and hit the passenger door of my Jeep. It left a dent. That wasn't funny anymore. I got in the vehicle and turned on the LED light bar on the roof. I lit up the entire edge of the forest. I didn't see anyone. No kids, no bears, nothing. Just trees and brush. But what really scared me was what happened when I turned the engine off for a second to listen. I heard footsteps. They weren't the steps of a four-legged animal running around. It was something heavy, walking on 2 feet. It moved slowly, circling the clearing right where the light of my headlights ended. I didn't get out to grab the stove. I left it there. I started the Jeep, turned around, and went down that trail as fast as I could, almost wrecking the suspension. As I drove down, I could swear something was running through the woods alongside the road, keeping pace with me until I reached the pavement. I don't know what's up there. My brother-in-law says it was probably a bear or a mountain lion, but bears don't throw rocks, and mountain lions don't make that kind of noise when they walk. I'm not going back to that logging area, and if you go, don't get out of your car.